Before this story begins, subscribe right now, because tonight's tale is about rejection, revenge, and the moment a king realizes the woman he threw away was born to wear a greater crown than his own. The Alpha King cast her aside for a noble Luna and believed she would disappear forever. But when she returned beside a far more powerful king, the entire wolf kingdom trembled. If you love emotional fantasy stories filled with werewolf royalty, forbidden love, powerful queens, shocking revenge, and unforgettable transformations, hit subscribe now, because once he sees her new crown, his world will never be the same again. The metallic scent of fresh rain and crushed mountain pines was entirely suffocating tonight, a cruel distortion of the sacred bonding ceremony that was supposed to secure her future. Instead, the heavy stone floor of the obsidian pack courtyard bit into Adeline Sterling's knees, the rough granite scraping her palms as she was forced to look up at the man she had loved for 7 grueling years. Alpha King Ethan Vance stood on the elevated marble dais, his towering muscular frame cloaked in the traditional midnight blue velvet of his royal lineage. His golden wolf eyes, usually a source of grounding warmth for Adeline, were completely hollow, freezing her where she knelt. Beside him stood Cecilia Dunois, a high-born noble wolf radiating arrogant elegance, her fingers already laced possessively through Ethan's silver-trimmed cape. "You were a temporary mistake, Adeline," Ethan's voice boomed across the silent courtyard, vibrating with the terrifying, crushing authority of an Alpha King. The words sliced through the crisp night air, shattering the remaining fragments of her dignity in front of thousands of watching pack members. A weak, broken wolf from a discarded bloodline cannot sit on the throne of the Obsidian Kingdom. Cecilia brings the nobility, the strength, and the lineage my people demand. I, Alpha King Ethan Vance, formally reject you as my mate and exile you from these lands forever. A collective, mocking whisper rippled through the elite crowd. Adeline felt the phantom snap of their mate bond tearing within her chest, a physical, agonizing rupture that made her gasp for air, her fingers clutching at the dirt. She had bled for this pack. She had managed their borders, tended their wounded, and sacrificed her own health to support Ethan's rapid ascent to power when his throne was challenged. And now she was being thrown to the wolves like garbage entirely because her lineage carried no title. Adeline forced herself to stand, her spine cracking with a sudden, defiant stiffness that startled the guards stepping forward to escort her out. She didn't let a single tear fall in front of the man who had traded her soul for political convenience. She looked past Ethan, locking eyes with Cecilia, who smirked from beneath her diamond tiara, completely secure in her stolen victory. "You think you've secured a throne, Ethan," Adeline whispered, her voice low but carrying a strange, resonant echo that caused the pack's elder wolves to shift uncomfortably. "But you've only proven that you are too small to carry the weight of a true mate." She turned her back on the gold-leafed gates of her childhood home, stepping out into the dark, uncharted wilderness beyond the Obsidian Kingdom's borders. She had no pack, no title, and a fractured spirit. But as she crossed into the ancient, mist-shrouded territories of the rival Eclipse Empire, a realm ruled by a feared, centuries-old king whom no alpha dared to challenge, Adeline was entirely unaware that the dormant blood flowing through her veins wasn't weak at all. It was the long-lost signature of a forgotten royal dynasty. And the new king waiting for her in the shadows wouldn't just give her a home. He would place a crown of black and gold upon her head, forcing Ethan to kneel before the very woman he threw away. The bone-chilling mists of the northern borderlands clung to Adeline's tattered cloak like spectral fingers. For 3 days and 3 nights she ran. She didn't use her wolf form. The agony of the broken mate bond had left her inner beast curled in a silent, shivering ball of trauma deep within her subconscious. Every step away from the Obsidian Kingdom felt like tearing raw muscle from bone, yet she refused to slow down. Her deepest desire had never been the grandeur of a throne. Growing up as the daughter of a disgraced, low-ranking Omega Guardian, Adeline had known only isolation. Her father had passed away in a border skirmish when she was 10, leaving her with nothing but a silver signet ring and a bedtime story about a time when their bloodline didn't have to bow to anyone. When Ethan had noticed her years ago, a fierce, protective young warrior fighting to defend the pack's outer perimeter, she thought she had finally found safety. She believed his love was her true home. For 7 years she became his shadow, his strategist, and his most loyal defender, completely suppressing her own ambition so his light could burn brighter. Her deepest fear was precisely the nightmare she was currently living, to be exposed as utterly worthless to the one person she had given her life to protect, discarded in the dirt while the entire world watched and laughed. The shadow of the eclipse. On the fourth morning, the dense forest abruptly ended, giving way to a sight that made Adeline freeze in her tracks. Rising from the black volcanic rock of the frozen northern valleys was the citadel of the Eclipse Empire. Unlike the wooden and marble fortresses of the Alpha Pacts, this was a sprawling kingdom built of dark obsidian stone and reinforced steel, its spires piercing the low gray clouds like jagged teeth. This was the territory of King Dominic Cavil. He was not an alpha in the traditional sense. He was an Lecan monarch, an ancient, pure-blooded sovereign whose lineage predated the modern pack system by 1,000 years. The rumors whispered around the campfire in the Obsidian Pack painted Dominic as a ruthless, unyielding warlord, a creature of pure shadows who executed spies without trial and recognized no law but his own. Adeline collapsed at the primary checkpoint, her body thoroughly exhausted, her feverish skin burning against the frozen mud. Through her blurred vision, she saw a pair of heavy dragon-scaled leather boots halt directly in front of her face. "What do we have here?" a deep, smooth voice murmured, sounding like velvet wrapped around gravel. "A stray wolf from the south. And she carries the scent of a fresh royal rejection." Adeline forced her head up. The man standing over her was towering, his physical presence so immense it seemed to warp the very air around him. His hair was black as midnight, framing a face of devastating aristocratic symmetry. But it was his eyes that trapped her breath. They weren't the gold of a standard alpha, but a swirling cosmic silver that radiated an ancient, suffocating power. "Kill me, or let me pass," Adeline rasped, her vision fading at the edges. "But do not make me bow." Dominic leaned down, his silver eyes narrowing as his gaze swept over her pale face. Suddenly his breath hitched. His hand reached out, his long leather-gloved fingers gently taking her chin and tilting her face toward the cold winter sun. The moment his skin made contact with her jaw, an electric shockwave of raw, ancestral energy rippled through the clearing, causing the stone walls of the citadel to visibly vibrate. Dominic's expression transformed from amused indifference into a sharp, terrifying intensity. He looked at the silver signet ring hanging from a cord around her neck. "Alistair," Dominic commanded, his voice dropping into a low, resonant growl that made his nearby elite guards instantly drop to one knee. A tall, older Lecan warrior with silver-streaked hair stepped forward from the shadows of the gateway. "Yes, your majesty? Take her to the royal chambers. Call the high healers immediately," Dominic ordered, slipping his arms beneath Adeline's limp body and lifting her as if she weighed nothing. He held her close against his chest, his silver eyes flashing with a possessive ancient hunger. "The South has no idea what they just threw away. This is no Omega stray, Alistair. The royal blood of the First Dynasty has just returned to the North." Adeline drifted into unconsciousness, wrapped in the scent of cedarwood, dark chocolate and winter frost, the scent of King Dominic Cavil. For the first time in 7 years, the agonizing ache of the broken mate bond within her chest began to quiet down, replaced by a deep, throbbing warmth that felt like a sleeping dragon finally opening its eyes in the dark. Ethan Vance thought he had stripped her of everything, entirely unaware that his rejection was the exact key needed to unlock a power that would soon dwarf his entire kingdom. The recovery inside the Obsidian Citadel took 3 weeks. When Adeline finally woke, she was no longer surrounded by the cold stone of an outcast cell. She lay in a massive 4-poster bed draped in charcoal silk, the air warmed by a roaring hearth. Her fever was gone, and the agonizing ache of Ethan's rejection had been replaced by a strange humming vitality that vibrated beneath her skin. Sitting at the foot of her bed was Alistair Sterling, the ancient king's chief advisor. Beside him lay a velvet tray holding her father's silver signet ring and a heavy leather scroll bound in gold thread. "You have slept for a long time, Lady Adeline," Alistair said, his voice carrying the deep reverence of a scholar uncovering a holy relic. "Your inner wolf did not break from the rejection. She went into hibernation to survive a profound genetic awakening." Adeline sat up, pulling the silk sheets to her chest, her brown eyes tracking the old Lecan warily. "What awakening? I am an Omega's daughter. My bloodline is the weakest in the southern valleys." "Your bloodline was hidden, not weak," a deep, rich voice cut through the room. The heavy double doors swung open and King Dominic Cavil stepped into the chamber. He had stripped off his battlefield armor, wearing a simple dark silver tunic that clung to his broad chest. His cosmic silver eyes locked onto Adeline, sending an intense magnetic jolt straight down her spine. 700 years ago, the first Wolf dynasty ruled the entire continent before the Alpha Pacts rebelled and fractured the empire, Dominic said, stepping closer until he stood right beside her bed. He picked up her father's silver ring, turning it in his powerful fingers. The crest on this ring belongs to the House of Thorn, the imperial line of the true Wolf Queens. Your ancestors fled south and masked their scent to survive the purges. Ethan Vance didn't reject an Omega, Adeline. He rejected the rightful heir to the high throne. Adeline's breath trapped itself in her lungs. She looked from the ring to Dominic's face, her mind spinning. No, that's impossible. If I am royal, why did I feel so weak? Why could I never challenge Ethan's choices? Because your power requires a catalyst, Dominic whispered, leaning down until his face was inches from hers. The scent of winter frost and cedarwood enveloped her, completely intoxicating her senses. A wolf queen cannot awaken while bound to a lesser alpha. Ethan's rejection didn't destroy you, it broke the cage. And now you have a choice to make. He unrolled the gold-bound leather scroll, revealing a royal decree. The southern kingdoms are fracturing. Ethan Vance has formed a political alliance with the Dunois noble line by marrying Cecilia, and they are preparing to expand their borders toward our trading routes. I do not recognize the authority of Alpha Kings. I recognize the true blood. Sign this decree, Adeline. Claim your true heritage, accept my protection, and let me place the crown of the Eclipse Empire upon your head as my ruling queen. The shocking discovery. Adeline's hand trembled as she reached for the quill. To accept meant declaring war on her past. It meant facing Ethan not as a weeping exile but as a sovereign ruler. But as she looked into Dominic's silver eyes, she saw no manipulation, no desire to use her as a political trophy. He looked at her with a profound, unyielding respect that made her feel untouchable. She dipped the quill in black ink and signed her name, Adeline Thorn. The moment the ink dried, a deafening howl echoed from the courtyard below. The heavy stone fortress of the citadel seemed to rumble as a massive surge of silver light erupted from Adeline's chest, enveloping her and Dominic in a blinding aura of ancient energy. Her inner wolf, once a quiet, submissive creature, reared its head within her mind, transforming into a massive silver-furred beast with eyes that burned like twin stars. It is done, Dominic smiled fiercely, his fingers lacing through hers, the touch sending sparks of pure electricity through their newly formed sovereign bond. Let the South celebrate their little wedding. They have no idea that the true Queen of the North has just awakened. Adeline stood up from the bed, her bare feet hitting the cold stone floor without a single shiver. The weakness was entirely gone. She looked out the high window at the thousands of Lecan warriors assembling in the courtyard below, all of them turning toward her tower and crashing their fists against their chests in a rhythmic, deafening salute. Ethan Vance had thrown her away to secure a petty pack throne, entirely unaware that by castigating her, he had unleashed the one woman born to rule far above him. The transformation of the Eclipse Citadel from a grim military fortress into a shimmering seat of imperial power happened with terrifying speed. For 2 long years Adeline did not look south. She buried herself in the ancient arts of the First Dynasty, her body hardening under the brutal training regimens of Alistair Stirling, while her mind sharpened under the personal tutelage of King Dominic Cavil. She was no longer the submissive warrior who mended boots and packed rations for an ungrateful alpha. Her posture had become regal, her movements fluid and lethal. Her silver-furred wolf had fully integrated into her subconscious, granting her an aura of commanding authority that made even the highest-ranking Lecan generals lower their heads when she passed. But as her power grew, so did the magnetic, undeniable tension between her and Dominic. The midday interlude. They stood in the center of the subterranean training grounds, their heavy iron practice broadswords clashing in a rhythmic echoing dance of sparks. Adeline lunged forward, her silver wolf energy flaring around her blade as she brought it down toward Dominic's shoulder. With a low, amused chuckle, Dominic deflected the strike, his massive frame shifting effortlessly as he stepped into her guard. In a fraction of a second, his sword clattered to the stone floor, and his large leather-gloved hands locked securely around her waist, pinning her back against his broad chest. Your left flank is still exposed when you strike with passion, my queen, Dominic whispered against her ear, his breath a warm, intoxicating mix of winter frost and rich cedarwood. Adeline turned slowly within his grasp, her brown eyes burning with a mixture of exertion and a deep, simmering attraction that had been building for months. Her hands came to rest against his chest, feeling the heavy, rapid thumping of his heart. I strike with passion because I am learning from a king who knows no moderation, Adeline replied softly, her gaze dropping to his lips. Dominic's silver eyes flared with a sudden, possessive hunger. He leaned closer, his fingers tightening against her waist, his entire presence demanding her surrender, not as a master but as a true equal. Before his lips could meet hers, the heavy iron doors of the training grounds groaned open, breaking the spell. Alistair entered, his expression exceptionally grim as he held a gold-waxed scroll. Your Majesties, the Southern Border Scouts have just returned. Alpha King Ethan Vance has officially completed his conquest of the Southern Valleys. To celebrate his expanded territory, he has called for a grand gathering of all supernatural kingdoms at the neutral Sunken Palace next month. Adeline stepped back from Dominic, her spine instantly stiffening as the name of her betrayer echoed through the stone hall. He is inviting the Eclipse Empire? Adeline asked, her voice dropping into a dangerous, icy register. He believes he has achieved enough military might to force us into a non-aggression pact, Alistair explained, sliding the scroll onto a stone table. He has no idea you are alive, Lady Adeline. The Southern spies believe you succumbed to the winter mists 2 years ago. Ethan is preparing to showcase his perfect Luna, Cecilia to the world as the pinnacle of Southern royalty. The dangerous bait. Let him showcase her, Dominic said, stepping up beside Adeline, his large hand coming to rest protectively over hers, his silver eyes flashing with a ruthless, protective joy. We shall attend this little gathering. It is time for the Eclipse Empire to formalize your coronation on a global stage. We will let Ethan Vance see exactly what kind of crown his stupidity bought you. But as the preparations for the journey began, a darker element crawled into the light. 2 days before their departure, a rogue southern wolf was captured at the northern perimeter. When brought before the high throne, the trembling prisoner revealed a terrifying rumor. Ethan's advisors had subtly planted clues that the Thorn bloodline was completely extinct, claiming that any wolf claiming to carry the ancestral lineage was an impostor using dark sorcery to destabilize the packs. It was a brilliant, manipulative red herring designed by Cecilia's noble family. If Adeline revealed herself, Ethan wouldn't just see an ex-mate. He would claim she was a fraudulent witch using illusion magic, giving the United Southern Pacts a political justification to launch an all-out holy war against the Eclipse Empire. Adeline stood before the high mirrors of her grand chambers, staring at the exquisite dress Alistair's weavers had prepared for the gathering, a gown of heavy midnight black silk woven with pure gold thread, designed to mimic the armor of the ancient imperial queens. The political traps were set. The web of misdirection was spinning. One wrong move at the Sunken Palace, and her new home would burn in the fires of a continental war. A critical moment for the realm. Oh family, my heart is absolutely racing. Ethan and Cecilia have built a massive defensive lie to protect their stolen throne, and they are ready to brand Adeline a fraud the moment she steps into the light. Do you think Adeline should reveal her true identity immediately at the gathering, or should she let Ethan play his hand first before dropping the ultimate trap on his alliance? Tell me your strategies in the comments below right now. I need to hear your thoughts. And if you are absolutely desperate to see Dominic defend his queen against the entire Southern army, hit that subscribe button immediately and stay tuned for the grand entry. Dominic stepped into the chamber, his eyes raking over her magnificent form. He reached into a velvet box and pulled out the Thorn Imperial crown, a breathtaking tiara of solid black iron and raw, unpolished gold filigree that perfectly matched her gown. He placed it gently upon her head, his silver eyes locking onto hers with absolute, eternal devotion. Let them spin their lies, Adeline, Dominic whispered fiercely. A wolf can bark at the moon all night, but it cannot change the tides. You are the queen. And tonight we take back what is yours. The Sunken Palace was a marvel of ancient engineering, carved entirely into the sheer white cliffs of a neutral coastal valley where the southern pack lands met the dark seas of the north. Tonight, Its massive grand ballroom was illuminated by thousands of floating crystal candles, their flickering light reflecting off the polished marble floors and the jewel-encrusted garments of the continent's most powerful supernatural rulers. At the center of the room, standing on a raised platform beneath the banners of the United Southern Pax, was Alpha King Ethan Vance. He looked commanding, his golden wolf eyes scanning the crowd with a heavy air of absolute conquest. Beside him, dressed in an over-the-top gown of layered white lace and diamonds, stood Luna Cecilia. She smiled with manicured perfection, soaking in the sycophantic praise of the lesser alphas who crowded around them. "The Northern Territories are quiet tonight," Ethan murmured to his beta, his voice carrying an edge of arrogant satisfaction. "It seems King Dominic Cavil finally understands that the Southern Valleys are fully unified under my name. If he has any wisdom, he will sign the treaty tonight without a fight. The Eclipse Empire has arrived." The royal herald's voice suddenly boomed across the cavernous ballroom, cutting through the music and the chatter like a knife. A heavy, suffocating silence instantly fell over the room. The massive iron double doors of the ballroom swung open, and a blast of crisp, Arctic air rolled across the marble floor, causing the floating candles to flicker violently. The Imperial entry. Walking side by side, flanked by 12 elite Lecan guards in heavy black armor, came the rulers of the North. King Dominic Cavil stepped forward, his towering frame clad in dark silver armor, his cosmic silver eyes radiating a cold, ancient power that made every alpha in the room instinctively take a step back. But as magnificent as the Lecan monarch was, he was not the reason the entire ballroom collectively gasped for air. Walking beside him, her hand resting gracefully on his forearm, was Adeline. She was breathtakingly unrecognizable. Dressed in the heavy midnight black silk gown woven with pure gold thread, she moved with an effortless, lethal elegance. On her head sat the thorn imperial crown, the solid black iron and raw gold filigree catching the light with a terrifyingly beautiful brilliance. Her skin glowed with health, and her brown eyes burned with an unshakable royal authority that completely eclipsed every noblewoman in the room. Ethan Vance froze, his glass shattering in his powerful grip as red wine spilled across his hand like blood. His golden eyes widened in absolute paralyzing horror. "Adeline?" Ethan whispered, his voice cracking through the silent room. Beside him, Cecilia's face drained of all color, her fingers digging so hard into her diamond purse that the strap snapped. No, she's dead. She died in the wilderness. This is an illusion. It's dark sorcery." Adeline stepped away from Dominic, her eyes locking onto the man who had thrown her into the dirt 2 years ago. She didn't look at him with anger. She looked at him with the cold, detached amusement of a goddess looking at an insect. "You look as though you've seen a ghost, Alpha King Ethan." Adeline's voice resonated through the ballroom, carrying a deep, melodic power that caused the ancient stone walls to hum in response. "The trap is sprung. Guards, arrest her." Cecilia shrieked, her perfectly manicured facade completely fracturing into ugly desperation as she pointed a trembling finger at the dais. "This woman is an imposter. The Thorn bloodline is extinct. She is a fraudulent witch using illegal illusion magic to destabilize our peace. Execute her on the spot." 4 high-ranking Southern Pack executioners, eager to please their Alpha King, drew their silver blades and stepped toward Adeline. Before Dominic could even reach for his sword, Adeline stepped forward. She didn't flinch. Instead, she threw her head back and a deafening, majestic howl ripped from her throat. The sound was not the submissive whine of an omega. It was the world-shaking roar of the First Dynasty. A massive, blinding shockwave of pure silver wolf energy erupted from her chest, expanding across the ballroom like a supernova. The sheer force of her ancestral aura hit the 4 executioners, sending them flying backward through the air until they crashed heavily against the marble pillars. As the silver light swirled around her, a massive phantom image of a giant, silver-furred wolf with glowing star-like eyes manifested behind her throne, baring its fangs at the crowd. The ancestral elders of the Southern Pax immediately dropped to their knees, their bodies trembling with a genetic, instinctual terror. "The true blood," one of the oldest alphas whispered, his voice shaking with absolute reverence as he bowed his head to the floor. "The Imperial Dynasty has returned. She is no imposter. She is the High Queen." Adeline stood in the center of the silver storm, her golden woven dress rippling around her as she looked down at Ethan, who had fallen back onto his throne, his face completely pale, his chest heaving with a sudden, suffocating realization. He hadn't just exiled an Omega. He had thrown away the ultimate key to the entire supernatural empire, and now she was standing before him as a sovereign ruler, crowned beside a king who could crush his world with a single glance. Dominic stepped up beside Adeline, his large hand resting firmly on the hilt of his greatsword as his cosmic silver eyes swept over the kneeling crowd. "The next person who draws a blade against my queen," Dominic growled, his voice vibrating with a terrifying promise of death, "will see their entire kingdom reduced to ash before the sun rises. Choose your next words very carefully, Ethan Vance." The suffocating silence in the grand ballroom was broken only by the ragged, uneven breathing of Alpha King Ethan Vance. The golden wolf eyes that had once looked down on Adeline with such icy dismissal were now wide, swimming with a volatile mix of profound regret, mounting panic, and an old, possessive jealousy that ignited like wildfire in his chest. He took a stumbling step down from his royal platform, completely ignoring Cecilia, who was frantically grabbing at his velvet cape. "Adeline." Ethan choked out, his voice raw, stripped of all alpha authority. He looked at her radiant skin, the lethal elegance of her posture, and the heavy black and gold crown that looked so utterly natural on her head. "It can't be. You were always so quiet. Your wolf. Why did you never show me this power? Why did you keep this from me?" "I didn't keep anything from you, Ethan," Adeline said, her voice dropping into a terrifyingly calm conversational tone that cut deeper than any snarl. She took a slow step toward him, her midnight black silk gown rustling softly against the marble floor. "You never saw my strength because you only ever looked at me to see your own reflection. You wanted a mirror to feed your ego, not a queen to share your weight." The desperate gambit. Driven by a sudden, delusional wave of desperation, Ethan reached out, his hand trembling as he attempted to grasp Adeline's wrist. "The bond. Adeline, the mate bond we shared for 7 years. It can't be entirely gone. Come back to the south. We can restructure the alliance. You belong on the throne of the Obsidian Kingdom beside me." Before his fingers could even graze the fabric of her sleeve, a wall of pure, crackling silver lightning slammed down between them. Dominic Cavell didn't just step forward, he commanded the space. His massive frame completely shielded Adeline from view, his cosmic silver eyes burning with a primal, ancient wrath that caused the floating crystal candles overhead to spontaneously shatter, showering the outer edges of the room in glittering dust. "Touch her," Dominic growled, his voice dropping into a low, terrifying vibration that rattled the fillings in the teeth of every wolf present. "And I will tear your throat out with my bare hands, Alpha King. She is no longer your discarded mate. She is the High Queen of the Eclipse Empire, and her shadow alone is worth more than your entire lineage." Ethan flinched, stepping back as the sheer weight of Dominic's Leaken aura pressed against his chest like a physical lead block. Suddenly, Cecilia shoved her way past Ethan, her face twisted in a mask of venomous desperation. She knew that if Adeline walked out of this room victorious, her own legitimacy as Luna would be utterly destroyed. "Don't listen to her," Cecilia shrieked, turning to the surrounding southern alphas who were still frozen on their knees. "Are you all cowards? She has bewitched the Leaken King. She is a threat to the stability of all our packs. If we do not execute her now, the North will use her fake bloodline to enslave us all. Alphas, draw your weapons. Protect the southern valleys." The final fracture. For a terrifying second, tension stretched across the room like a piano wire tuned too tight. A few of the younger, hot-headed southern alphas gripped the hilts of their swords, their eyes darting between Ethan and the magnificent silver wolf phantom still shimmering behind Adeline. But the rebellion died before it could even begin. "Silence, child," the oldest elder of the Obsidian pack roared, standing up and striking his heavy wooden staff against the floor. He looked at Cecilia with profound disgust before turning back to Adeline, dropping to both knees once more. "We will not commit treason against the First Dynasty. The Thorn aura cannot be faked by sorcery. Alpha King Ethan Vance, your greed has blinded you and your actions have brought shame upon the ancestors." One by one, the southern alphas who had previously pledged their absolute loyalty to Ethan's expansion treaty turned away from him. They lowered their banners, sheathed their blades, and bowed their heads toward Adeline and Dominic. The Grand Southern Alliance that Ethan had spent 2 years building through intimidation and political marriage dissolved into worthless vapor in less than 5 minutes. Ethan looked around the room, a hollow, sickening realization washing over him. He was completely isolated. He had traded a living goddess for a noble title, only for that title to become utterly meaningless the moment the true queen stood up. Adeline looked at the broken Alpha King one last time, her brown eyes completely devoid of malice, filled only with a quiet, unshakable finality. "The Southern treaties are dead, Ethan," Adeline whispered, turning her back on him with absolute indifference as she took Dominic's offered arm. "Keep your little throne. Keep your Luna. But remember this moment every time you look out at the northern horizon. You didn't throw me away. You just set me free." Drop a crown in the comments section right now if you are absolutely thrilled by this massive victory for Adeline. And if you want to see how she and Dominic solidify their beautiful new era in the grand finale, make sure you are subscribed with notifications turned on right now. Flanked by their elite Leakin guards, Adeline and Dominic walked out of the sunken palace, the doors closing behind them with a heavy, resounding boom that signaled the absolute end of the old world order. As they stepped out into the crisp, starry northern night, Dominic stopped, turning Adeline toward him. His large hands came up to gently frame her face, his silver eyes melting into a profound, breathless warmth. "You were magnificent, my queen," he murmured. "We were magnificent, my king," Adeline smiled, leaning into his touch as the true journey of the High Dynasty finally began. The heavy iron doors of the sunken palace had closed, but the seismic shockwaves of that night continued to ripple across the continent for months. The Grand Southern Alliance that Ethan Vance had spent years constructing did not just fracture. It completely disintegrated. Within weeks of the gathering, 3 of the largest southern packs formally severed their ties with the Obsidian Kingdom. They sent lavish caravans wrapped in silk and loaded with rare gemstones, fine metals, and ancient texts up the northern mountain passes, all addressed to the House of Thorn. The message was clear. They were no longer bowing to an arrogant Alpha King. They were seeking the favor of the true High Queen. Up in the northern citadel, the atmosphere was entirely transformed. The dark, brooding fortress of the Eclipse Empire was now alive with the vibrant energy of a golden age. Flags of black and gold fluttered proudly from the high stone spires, side by side with the traditional silver banners of the Leakin monarch. A quiet moment of peace. Adeline stood on the high stone balcony of the Grand Solar, her black and gold silk gown catching the soft early spring breeze. The bitter winter mist had finally receded, revealing a breathtaking view of green valleys blooming beneath the northern sun. She looked down at her hands, the same hands that had once been raw and blistered from scrubbing the floors of Ethan's warriors. Now her fingers were adorned with royal rings, her skin glowing with a deep, radiant health that came from an aligned soul. A pair of strong, familiar arms wrapped gently around her waist from behind. Dominic pulled her back against his broad chest, burying his face in the crook of her neck, his scent of cedarwood and winter frost instantly enveloping her in absolute safety. "The emissaries from the western packs have just left," Dominic murmured, his deep voice sending a pleasant vibration through her spine. "They have officially signed the new trade decrees. They accepted every single one of your terms without a single word of protest." Adeline turned within his embrace, a soft, serene smile resting on her lips as she looked up into his cosmic silver eyes. "They didn't accept them because of me, Dominic. They accepted them because they are terrified of you." "No, my love," Dominic corrected gently, his large hand coming up to trace the elegant line of her jaw, his thumb wiping away a stray strand of her dark hair. "They are terrified of us. Together we have built a kingdom where the weak are protected and the strong are held accountable. You gave this empire a heart, Adeline. I merely gave it teeth." The romantic bond between them had deepened into something entirely unbreakable, stripped of the toxic expectations of her past. Dominic didn't want a submissive mate to hide away in his shadow. He rejoiced in her strength, celebrated her sharp intelligence, and stood beside her as a true, unyielding equal. The view from the fractured throne. Meanwhile, far to the south, a heavy, suffocating silence hung over the Obsidian Pack. The grand gardens were overgrown, the wealth of the pack dwindling as trading routes dried up. Inside the empty council chambers, Alpha King Ethan Vance sat alone at the long mahogany table, a half-empty bottle of amber liquor resting near his hand. He looked haggard, his golden wolf eyes completely bloodshot and hollow. Every single day his scouts returned with the same news. The Eclipse Empire was flourishing under Queen Adeline's rule. His own pack members were whispering behind his back, openly questioning his judgment. Their respect for his alpha authority completely evaporated. The door to the chamber burst open and Cecilia walked in, her voice shrill and desperate as she waved a ledger. "Ethan, the pack elders are refusing to fund the autumn gala. They say we are facing a deficit. You need to force them to pay. I am the Luna of this pack, and I will not be humiliated by a bunch of lower-income omegas." Ethan didn't even look up at her. He just stared blankly at the empty stone fireplace, his mind drifting back to the sunken palace, to the image of Adeline dressed in magnificent black and gold, looking at him with nothing but cold, detached pity. "Shut up, Cecilia," Ethan whispered, his voice completely dead, devoid of any anger or passion. "What did you say to me?" she gasped, her face twisting in outrage. "I said shut up," Ethan said louder this time, finally turning his hollow eyes toward her. "You wanted a throne. Look around you. This is what we have left. We threw away a goddess for a title, and now we are ruling over a graveyard of our own making. Leave me alone." Cecilia stumbled back, her face draining of color as she realized that her stolen victory was nothing more than a gilded cage. She had faded into complete irrelevance, a historical footnote in the magnificent saga of the queen she had tried to destroy. Back in the Northern Kingdom, Adeline leaned her head against Dominic's chest as the golden spring sunlight washed over the citadel. The silver signet ring that had once been her only connection to a forgotten past now rested inside a beautiful glass case in the Grand Library, a historical marker of the moment her old life ended and her true destiny began. She looked out at the horizon, her hand tightly clasped in Dominic's, completely filled with peace, fulfillment, and an unshakable strength for the future. The spring tranquility of the Eclipse Empire was shattered on the eve of the solar eclipse. A frantic border scout collapsed in the grand throne room, his armor stained with southern clay. "Your Majesties, it's Alpha King Ethan. He has lost his mind. He has gathered the last of his radical loyalists and breached the neutral valleys. He isn't launching a standard military raid. He is targeting the ancient Thorn ancestral crypts at the base of the northern mountains. He aims to desecrate the graves of the First Dynasty to break the pack's spiritual connection to Queen Adeline." Adeline stood up from her throne, her brown eyes flashing with a sudden, terrifying silver fire. The silver-furred wolf within her roared, its ancestral fury vibrating through the very stones of the citadel. "He thinks he can disturb my ancestors to save his dying ego?" Adeline's voice carried the terrifying resonance of a descending storm. "He is a cornered beast, my queen," Dominic said, stepping up beside her, his hand instantly finding the hilt of his great sword. His cosmic silver eyes burned with a lethal, predatory promise. "He wants a final reckoning. Let us give him an execution." The battle at the crypts. By midnight, the sky was pitch black as the moon began its slow pass over the sun. At the mouth of the monolithic, stone-carved Thorn crypts, Ethan Vance stood with 50 of his most desperate warriors. He looked completely unhinged, his golden wolf eyes wild with a manic, delusional fervor as his men used iron crowbars to pry open the ancient stone doors. "If I destroy her lineage, the Pax will see she is nothing but an illusion," Ethan muttered hysterically, his hands covered in dirt and sweat. "She will have to look at me. She will have to kneel." "The only one kneeling tonight, Ethan, is you," a voice boomed through the dark valley. Ethan spun around. Descending the mountain path, illuminated by the eerie, silver corona of the eclipsing moon, were Adeline and Dominic. They didn't bring an army. They didn't need one. Adeline marched in her imperial black and gold armor, the thorn crown gleaming beneath the eclipse. Beside her, Dominic moved like a god of war, his broad shoulders casting a shadow that seemed to swallow the forest whole. "Adeline!" Ethan shrieked, drawing his dual silver daggers, his alpha aura flaring in a desperate, suffocating wave. "Attack them! Kill the Leaken King! Reclaim our honor!" His loyalists charged. But before they could even close the distance, Dominic moved. He was a blur of silver light and lethal precision. With a single devastating swing of his great sword, a shock wave of Leaken energy rippled across the grass, instantly shattering the weapons of the charging warriors and throwing them to the ground unconscious and bleeding. Dominic systematically dismantled Ethan's elite guard in less than 60 seconds, leaving only the Alpha King standing. The final justice. Ethan backed up against the ancient stone doors of the crypt, his breath coming in ragged, terrified gasps as Dominic stepped aside, allowing Adeline to face her betrayer alone. "You think your little alpha titles mean anything to the true blood?" Adeline asked, stepping closer, her presence so immensely heavy that the air around Ethan grew thin. "I loved you for 7 years." Ethan screamed, lunging forward in a pathetic, desperate attempt to drive his dagger into her chest. "You were mine." Adeline didn't even draw a weapon. She simply raised her right hand. The silver signet ring hanging from her neck flared with a blinding, celestial brilliance. A massive, solid spectral manifestation of her silver wolf erupted from her body, its giant jaws snapping closed directly onto Ethan's daggers, crushing the steel into useless powder. The shockwave hit Ethan squarely in the chest, lifting him off his feet and slamming him violently against the stone doors of the crypt. He slid down to the dirt, his alpha aura completely shattered, his inner wolf whimpering in absolute genetic submission. He looked up at Adeline, tears of blood leaking from his golden eyes as he realized the ultimate, immutable truth. "You really are the High Queen," Ethan whispered, his voice cracking as his crown tumbled from his head into the mud at her feet. "I always was, Ethan," Adeline said, looking down at him with an icy finality. "You were just too small to see it." Dominic stepped up beside her, his hand resting firmly on the small of her back. "The Southern Council has already been notified of your treason, Ethan Vance. Your titles are officially stripped. Your pack has chosen a new alpha. You will spend the rest of your days in the subterranean cells of the Eclipse Citadel, watching the world flourish under the woman you threw away." Adeline didn't look back at Ethan as the Leakin guards dragged him away in heavy iron chains. She turned to Dominic, her brown eyes softening into a deep, breathless warmth as the eclipse ended, bathing the valley in a brilliant newborn dawn. 6 months later, the relentless winter frost that had dominated the northern peaks for centuries finally gave way to a brilliant, unclouded spring afternoon. The sun cast a warm, golden glow over the manicured courtyard of the Eclipse Citadel, illuminating the ancient white pine trees that were now in full, vibrant bloom. Adeline stood by the tall, arched windows of the Grand Solar, a soft, serene smile resting on her lips. She looked completely different from the broken, fragile outcast who had knelt on the cold stone of the Obsidian Pack 2 years ago. She wore a simple, elegant gown of soft cream-colored silk woven with thin gold thread that beautifully accented her now prominent, undeniable pregnancy. She was 8 months along, her skin radiating the healthy, glowing warmth of a mother who had finally found absolute peace. She gently placed both hands over her rounded abdomen, feeling the soft, reassuring flutter of the life growing inside her. A life that would never know the sting of rejection, the shadow of political greed, or the terror of being discarded. A fulfilling conclusion. The door to the Solar opened quietly and Alistair walked in, carrying a velvet tray holding a stack of newly catalogued royal edicts and the blueprints for a massive regional project. Alistair's posture carried an immense pride as he set the tray down on the obsidian table. "The final layout for the First Dynasty Historical Archives and Public Academies just cleared, Queen Adeline," Alistair said, his eyes shining with joy. "We are opening 5 new free learning centers across the southern border sectors by the end of the month. You are changing thousands of lives, providing safety to wolves who were once marginalized by the old pack system." "We are doing it together, Alistair," Adeline said gently, stepping forward to offer her advisor a warm, sincere nod of appreciation. "You stood by me when I was nothing but an exhausted stray at your gates. This isn't just about reclaiming an ancestral inheritance. It's about building a realm where no wolf is ever thrown away because of their rank." As Alistair left to finalize the operational decrees, a heavy, familiar pair of footsteps echoed from the hallway. King Dominic Cavil walked into the room. He had dropped his heavy battlefield cape at the door, his dark silver tunic loosened at the collar, his cosmic silver eyes softening into absolute adoration the moment they landed on Adeline. He didn't say a word. He simply walked straight to her, his large, warm hands immediately finding their place over hers on her stomach. "He's exceptionally restless today," Dominic murmured, a deep, rich chuckle vibrating against Adeline's shoulder as he leaned down to press a soft, lingering kiss to her cheek. "He knows his father is home," Adeline whispered, turning in his embrace to look up into the face of the man who had become her sanctuary, her partner, and her truest protector. The romantic connection between them had grown naturally, stripped of all political pretense. It was built on a profound foundation of shared vulnerability, respect, and a love so deep that it had completely healed the fractures of Adeline's past. Dominic wasn't standing beside her to control her lineage. He was standing beside her as an equal, ready to guide a completely new era of prosperity together. The final status. Across the territory, inside the cold, uniform stone walls of a subterranean isolation chamber deep within the mountains, Ethan Vance sat on a rough rock bench, staring blankly at a damp wall. His hands, once accustomed to royal velvet and sharp weapons, were heavily shackled in ancient Leacan iron. He was serving a lifetime sentence of total isolation, stripped of his titles, his rank, and his wolf's authority. Every single week, his heavy iron door slid open just enough for a guard to slide in a tray of basic prison rations. The small parchment accompanying the meal always bore the same imperial crest stamp, the United Crown of the House of Thorn. It was a quiet, permanent reminder of his absolute failure. He had traded a genuine, fiercely loyal goddess and his own potential future for a temporary seat at a corporate pack table that had vanished like smoke. He was entirely forgotten by the world he had sacrificed his soul to satisfy, left to spend the rest of his days watching the woman he discarded rule that very world from afar. As for Cecilia, stripped of her stolen title and entirely rejected by the new Southern Council, she had been exiled to the outermost perimeter agricultural sectors, forced to work the very soil she had once looked down upon, completely irrelevant to the grand history unfolding in the capital. Adeline leaned her head against Dominic's chest as the golden spring sunlight washed over the courtyard. The silver signet ring that had once represented her deepest heartbreak was now a symbol of global unity, a historical marker of the moment her old life ended and her true destiny began. She looked out at the horizon, her hand tightly clasped in Dominic's, completely filled with joy, fulfillment, and a beautiful, unshakable peace for the future.